I'm joined tonight by Republican Congressman Mike Lawler and Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz, both of whom voted for that bill tonight. And I'm so glad you're both here. Congressman Lawler, let me start with you, because a standalone bill sending aid to Israel with no spending cuts probably would have passed. Why didn't Republicans do that?
Look, the Speaker made a determination, obviously, to advance aid to Israel, $14.3 billion. But we need to pay for it. I know a lot of my Democratic colleagues are saying this is about conditioning aid for Israel for the first time. It's not conditioning it. We're going to support Israel. We're going to pass legislation that provides Israel with all the support that they need financially and militarily. But we have to pay for it. We're dealing with an existential crisis in this country, approaching $34 trillion in debt. Only in the United States Congress would showing how you're going to pay for this be a problem.
But it does add to the deficit, does it not? If this had passed as is with the IRS spending cuts, does that not add to the deficit, Congressman Lawler?
With all due respect, the CBO scoring has often been wrong. And the reality is that cutting spending is not going to add to the deficit here. We have a responsibility to pass aid to Israel. The Speaker put that forth on the floor today. It garnered bipartisan support. Obviously, the Senate has their idea of what they're going to do, and we're going to negotiate and go from there. But you know, I don't really, frankly, understand all the hubbub about this. At the end of the day, we're still going to have to pay for this one way or the other, whether it's included as a standalone bill or if we show the pay for in the bill.
Yeah, well,
so we're going to have to get there somehow.
I should note, everyone always criticizes the CBO when they say something that they don't like. Both parties do. So, Congressman Moskowitz.
With all due respect, Kaitlan, the CBO has continually revised their estimates time and again. So it's not a function of criticizing it when you don't like it. It's a reality of the CBO.
It's a pretty big number that would add to the deficit. It's not like it's within the margin of error. But Congressman Moskowitz, you were obviously a Democrat. Democratic leaders did not want you to vote for this bill, but you did anyway, despite having called it a political trap. Tell me why.
Well, first of all, it was a political trap, and you don't have to ask me. You can just ask the NRCC, who the very day they came out with this bill posted Democrats are going to have to choose between Israel and the IRS. And so that's why I was calling that out. I don't think that the Speaker should have done this. I mean, this is the Speaker's first full week. He's talked about trying to bring the House together. We're having these international issues. Obviously, this is a national security issue. Israel's our #1 ally. There was no reason to condition aid. There was no reason to make this political. There was no reason to divide the House. It could have been a real unifying moment, but instead he chose the other way. I voted for it because my grandmother's part of the Kindertransport out of Germany as a child. She told me about these things that are happening in the world right now, and it sounded like something that happened a long time ago. You go to the Holocaust Museum, you see these pictures, you hear these stories, you see people tattooed with numbers on their arms, and you think this could never happen. And we saw the largest amount of Jews killed in a single day on October 7th. And since then, we have seen anti-Semitism around the world. Jews gas the Jews, kill the Jews, exterminate the Jews in protests around this country, in cities and other cities around the world, on university campuses. Jews can't even walk to class without getting accosted. And so for me, this was a personal vote. It's unfortunate that they made it political. I'm happy that Chuck Schumer will not be taking this bill up. As you pointed out, and I know sometimes that we like to politicize the CBO around here, but obviously the CBO said it won't offset the cost of this. Listen, I'm for spending less. The American family spending less. I'm happy for government to spend less. We also should have tax parity in this country. I'm happy the Speaker is going to do a budget commission, but this wasn't the time to do that. Not on Israel, not in their time of need.
Congressman Lawler, what's your response to that?
Look, I respect my colleague from Florida. Obviously, we have a bill tomorrow that we have worked on together, the SHIP Act, which will increase secondary sanctions on Iranian petroleum. So, you know, we'll agree to disagree on this insofar as the spending offsets. The reality is the White House has asked for over $100 billion in supplemental aid. It's going to have to be paid for. So, you know, whether it's included in the bill or figured out down the road, the reality is it has to be paid for. No municipality or state in America could just put a bill forward without showing how you're going to pay for it. What the Speaker is saying is, look, we have nearly $34 trillion in debt in this country. This administration has spent over $5 trillion in new money over the last 2 years. It's unsustainable. It is the reason that we had record inflation. We have to rein in spending. That's why we're going through the appropriations process. We support aid to Israel. It is bipartisan. There is broad support for it. We can disagree on how we're going to pay for it. The reality is we have to pay for it. And I think anybody acting as though, showing that you need to pay for it in a bill is somehow a major crisis, I think just highlights the problem in Washington, where people think you don't need to pay for things, you can just spend unlimited.
Yeah.
Kaitlan, if I may, let me add something to that, though. And listen, the congressman and I agree a lot more than we disagree. We have a number of bills we're working on together. But one of the precedents here that the speaker is starting, I think, is extremely dangerous. And look, we do need to learn how to pay for things around here. I don't disagree with my colleague on that. But the next time there's a hurricane in Florida and we need a supplemental, the next time there's Superstorm Sandy in New York and New Jersey, the next time there's Hurricane Harvey in Texas, the next time there's an earthquake or a fire in California, the next time there's a fire in Hawaii, the next time there's something in Guam, the next time there's something in the Virgin Islands or in Puerto Rico, are we going to have to demand at that point that we do pay-fors on emergency supplementals in community times of need? That's the real question. That's the real concern that many of my colleagues and myself share.
Yeah, and of course, these pay-fors, I should note, they're not going to happen. I mean, they got passed in the House today, but it's not actually going to go anywhere because the Senate's not taking it up. The White House has said they would veto it, but I understand the point of principle.
Well,
but I do want to talk about...
With all due respect, Kaitlan, the Senate Majority Leader has said that before, and the White House has said that before, and yet they passed the D.C. crime bill that we put forth in the House after their comments
But Democrats
had
overwhelmingly started to support that.
It does happen
let's talk about why you're both here
themselves.
tonight, because you don't often see a Republican and a Democrat standing side by side doing an interview. The two of you have introduced this bipartisan legislation. And Congressman Lawler, as you mentioned, it imposes new sanctions targeting Iranian oil imports. How confident are you, Congressman Moskowitz, that this is actually going, if it passes the House, that it actually is going to become law?
Well, listen, I think you're going to see extreme bipartisan support tomorrow on this piece of legislation. It has almost 90 Democrats that have co-sponsored this. I expect an overwhelming majority of Republicans to vote for it as well. So it's going to get the 2/3 it needs to pass on suspension. And so I think the Senate should take this up. I think we need to send a strong message to Iran and the world that we're not going to tolerate the world's largest sponsor of terror getting around current sanctions, making money by selling their oil to China, and then funding Hezbollah and Hamas and other destabilizing forces around the world. There is no doubt right now that Hamas, Russia, China, North Korea are all talking to each other. And so this is extremely important. We have to cut off all sorts of financing, and this is one way to do that.
Congressman Lawler, what's your message to the Senate on getting this done?
Look, China is the biggest purchaser of Iranian petroleum, and Iranian petroleum sales are up 59% over the last 3 years. They are using these funds to fund terrorism, to fund Hamas, to fund Hezbollah, to fund other terrorist organizations with the sole purpose of wiping Israel off the face of the earth. We need to impose stricter sanctions on the buyers of Iranian petroleum, starting with China. These secondary sanctions are critically important. And so I think it is time for Congress to act, to make it very clear to China, to Russia, to Iran, that we will not tolerate their malign influence in the world and the conduct that they have engaged in that has undermined and destabilized the free world, and especially with the most recent terrorist attacks on the state of Israel and the attempt to annihilate the Jewish people. We will not tolerate it. We will not stand for it. And that's why it's imperative that Congress pass the SHIP Act and the Biden administration sign it into law.
Congressman Mike Lawler, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, thank you both for joining tonight.
Thank you.